Abomination, abomination. Iriva, Irira. One of the elders cried out, "This can never happen." But the queen, overwhelmed with sorrow, burst into tears. The son she had born was the only heir she could give the king, as she could no longer bear children. The king, torn between his duty and his love for his wife, stormed out of the palace in anger and summoned her to his chambers. Juan spotted something unusual. A bird, unlike any he had ever seen. It was perched on a gnarled branch, its feathers shimmering with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse with every beat of his heart. It was as if the bird was calling to him, drawing him in with its airy beauty. Juwan's instinct screamed at him to turn away, but a strange compulsion gripped him. He knocked an arrow and took aim, his breath steady, his eyes locked on the bird. The arrow flew through the air with deadly precision, and the bird fell silently to the ground. But when Juwan approached to claim his prize, the bird was gone. In its place lay a bracelet. In a village shrouded in mist and mystery, there lived a young orphan named Juwan. His parents had perished under strange circumstances when he was just a child, leaving him in the care of his uncle, Duro Jaye, a man whose very name sends shivers down the spine of those who uttered it. Duro Jaye was a figure of terror, a man with a heart as black as the night, known for his wickedness and his dealings with the dark forces that lurked in the shadows. Juwan's life was one of isolation and fear. Forced to live alone in a decrepit hut on the outskirts of the village, he was shunned by the villagers who pitied him but were too frightened to help. They whispered of Duro Jaye's cruel treatment, of how the boy was left to fend for himself, how he was barely more than a shadow in the woods, always watching, always waiting. The forest was Juwan's only refuge. There, among the ancient trees and hidden paths, he hunted for his survival, honing his skills with a bow and arrow. The forest was a place of secrets, where the wind carried the whispers of the dead, and the darkness seemed alive with unseen eyes. Juwan had learned to navigate his dangers, but nothing could have prepared him for the terror that was about to unfold. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest grew thick with shadows, Juwan spotted something unusual. A bird unlike any he had ever seen. It was perched on a gnarled branch, its feathers shimmering with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse with every beat of his heart. It was as if the bird was calling to him, drawing him in its airy beauty. Juwan's instinct screamed at him to turn away, but a strange compulsion gripped him. He knocked an arrow and took aim, his breath steady, his eyes locked on the bird. The arrow flew through the air with deadly precision, and the bird fell silently to the ground. But when Juwan approached to claim his prize, the bird was gone. In its place lay a bracelet, cold and heavy, with a design that seemed to writhe and twist like the branches of the quartz trees around him. Juwan's hands trembled as he reached for the bracelet. The moment his fingers brushed against it, a chill ran through his body, freezing his blood. As though the eyes of the forest had turned on him. But something else teared within him. He felt as though he was being watched, as though the eyes of the forest had turned against him. But something stirred within him. a dark curiosity, a hunger for the power that the bracelet promised. Without thinking, he slipped it onto his wrists. The next day, Juwon went to the market to get herbs for his cattle. A young girl was sick. Her mother held her sick daughter waiting to buy herbs for her. As they all queued to wait for their turn, her daughter eventually died in her mother's hands. The village was plunged into despair when the young girl died of the mysterious illness. The villagers gathered around her lifeless body, crying and sobbing, their faces pale with fear and grief. Juwon stood at a distance, his heart heavy with a sorrow he couldn't explain. Then, as if guided by an unseen force, he stepped forward, his hand reaching out to the girl. The bracelet on his wrist began to glow with an unholy light, casting twisted shadows on the ground. He then screamed with a loud voice, "Oya, Jide! Oya, Jide! Oya, Jide!" Before the horrified eyes of the villagers, the girl's chest heaved and her eyes fluttered open. She was alive. Gasps of shock and disbelief echoed through the crowd as they scampered for safety due to their shock and fear. They all ran as fast as they could. Juwon, the orphan boy who had been nothing more than a ghost to them, became a figure of awe and fear. Juwon could raise the dead. The whisper spread quickly. Juwon had the power to raise the dead. The next day, a group of 4 millers came to Juwon's house with their deceased master. Their master passed away that morning from his sleep. He was a generous and good man. They begged and pleaded with Juwon to do what he does to raise the dead man. And Juwon hearkened to their voice. He came out. This time, he tied different charms and wore a native costume to make him look like a deity. Then he bent down and asked them to step back. He looked into the sky and screamed with a loud voice, "Oya, Jide! Oya, Jide! Oya, Jide!" Immediately, the man who was dead coughed, opening his eyes. The villagers were in shock and disbelief. Some screamed and ran back due to shock. Others looked at Juwon and were amazed. They knelt down to thank him and celebrated their master. The dead began to rise one by one as Juwon's fame spread beyond the village. People from distant lands came seeking his help, offering him wealth and gifts in exchange for bringing their loved ones back from the grave. Juwon, once shunned and forgotten, now basked in the glory of his newfound power. But with each resurrection, the bracelet grew colder, and the shadows in the forest seemed to draw closer, watching, waiting. As Juwon's riches grew, so did his arrogance. He took many wives, lavishing them with gifts and intention. Except for his first wife, Abeni. Abeni, who had been with him since before his rise to power, began to see the darkness that had taken hold of Juwon's heart. She watched as he mistreated her. He would take different young girls and bring them to Abeni's room and sleep with them. Then Abeni walks into the room. He will shout at her to get out and cook for him and his mistresses. He will abandon her and refuse to give her money to cook, but ask her to go and farm and cook. Villagers mocked her and laughed at her. He flaunted his wealth and power as he became consumed by his own lust and greed. She knew the truth of the bracelets, and she knew it would destroy him, but she kept quiet and suffered in silence. The more Juwon used the bracelets, the more he felt its curse. Strange dreams plagued him, dreams of the underworld, where twisted figures whispered his name, beckoning him closer. He would wake in a cold sweat, the bracelet burning against his skin. But he was too far gone, too addicted to the power to kill. One night, as Juwon prepared for yet another journey to a neighboring village, where a wicked king had promised Juwon a fortune in exchange for raising a son, Abeni made her move. She waited until he was deep in sleep. his breathing slow and steady. And then she carefully removed the bracelet from his wrists. In its place, she left a simple replica, knowing that Juwon would not notice the difference until it was too late. The true bracelet she hid away far from Juwon's reach. Juwon awoke the next morning, oblivious to Abeni's betrayal. His mind focused on the riches that awaited him. But when Juwon arrived at the merchant's home, he made a shocking and disgraceful demand. You see, the wicked king Kacha had a wife of extraordinary beauty, with hair that flowed like a river and skin that gleamed like the sun. She was renowned as the most beautiful woman in all the kingdom combined, her grace unmatched. The moment Juwon laid eyes on her, he was consumed by desire. He boldly renegotiated, demanding the unimaginable: to spend a night with the king's wife. This audacious request enraged the king's elders and girls, one of whom nearly attacked Juwon. But Juwon remained unfazed, his arrogance and pride serving as his armor. He insisted on his outrageous demand, declaring that he wanted not just one night, but two. "Abomination!" one of the elders cried out. "This can never happen." But the queen, overwhelmed with sorrow, burst into tears. The son she had born was the only heir she could give the king, as she could no longer bear children. The king, torn between his duty and his love for his wife, stormed out of the palace in anger and summoned her to his chambers. "Are you even considering laying with him?" he demanded. She responded, "I can no longer bear children, and if you do not have an heir to the throne, we will lose our kingdom to your stepbrother. Is that what you want?" The king, with tears in his eyes, was devastated. He loved his wife deeply and could not bear the thought of another man touching her. Yet, they both agreed to the unthinkable and returned to the throne room. "I have accepted your terms," the king announced, "but you must lie with her in my presence." However, Juwon, ever more insolent, insisted on 2 nights instead of 1. The king, broken and despairing, agreed to Juwon's demand. Juwon was then treated as an honored guest. He was given the finest pots and the best meals, preparing him for his night with the queen. The queen could not be touched until Juwon had eaten the native food. The night arrived, and the queen, dressed in a simple nightgown, her body could be seen clearly from the dress she wore. She approached Juwon's hut. As she entered, she saw Juwon smiling in anticipation, welcoming her with open arms. Will Juwon be able to raise the king's only son? What will happen to Juwon if he fails to? The story just got started. Comment for part 2.